Hi everyone, so my name's Hayley McEwen. I teach in the Division of Sport and Exercise, and we've set up this great series, this lunchtime series of sport professionals in action seminars to give you an insight into different people's careers within sport. So we have athletes, we have coaches, and really give you an insight into how higher education has helped and assisted their career within sport as an athlete or as a coach. So we've set this up as an interview where we'll get an insight into people's reflections, into their development as a sports person, and also perhaps as a student as well, and how that has influenced their career. So we've got some world-class performers lined up over this term, over term one. So from Martin today, who we're really excited to speak to, through to Shelley Kerr, the national women's coach, in December. So we've got some great speakers, so hope you really enjoy the series, and feel free to add some questions in to these world-class performers. And we look forward to you engaging with the series, and thanks for coming along today. I'll hand over to Raleigh. Is that Raleigh next?
Yeah, thanks, Hayley, and thanks, Rebecca, and also thanks to Ewan O'Brien, our alumni engagement manager, for all the work that he's done in setting up the series. So it's been a great team effort. And look, we're absolutely delighted to be joined today by Martin Perry, a graduate of UWS and an elite para athlete here. And just to start really and give a bit of flavour of Martin's career, we've managed to source a lovely video that outlines not only his training routine, his actions and behaviours, but also some of the challenges that he faces in his everyday world. So we're going to watch this video to start with.
When I was born with only one complete limb, which was my right leg. My right arm stops a few inches below the wrist, and my left arm stops through the elbow joint. And at the time of birth, my left leg stopped around 3 inches after my knee. So this is where I grew up for the first sort of 9-10 years of my life. We used this area up here where there's a lot of grass and a lot of free space. We'd put a jumper on the ground each side of me here, and if it hit the wall behind me of the laundrette, then it was a goal. It's amazing where that can take you. So standing outside my first primary school, and it was this wall here that my brothers would lift me over at the weekends when the school was closed, and we'd go in and play football. So yeah, we'd all march out from across the road to come over and go over and jump in and play football until my mum would shout out the window, say, you know, your dinner's ready, come over. As soon as we had dinner, we'd be straight back over again, over the wall, playing football until it got dark. With having that connection to active schools and to Scottish Disability Sport, I was then able to be involved in parasports. Parasport is a constantly growing and developing movement, so it's fantastic to be a part of. So this is where we have all the previous final years of the school, and this is my year that we left in 2011. You know, it's amazing to be back in a place where my sporting career really started to flourish and get the opportunity to play different sports and to really push myself. My association with table tennis began at a Scottish Disability Sport summer camp, and it was there that Terry and his players from Drumchapel Table Tennis Club came along. We used a Velcro adaptation to primitively put the bat on the end of my forearm, but it wasn't until coming here and getting a feel for the club that we started to get more adaptations made that would allow me to play. The development of prosthetic happened through, obviously, after having the meetings with Scottish Disability Sport, and then coming to the club and then having a look at some online footage of players with similar disabilities.
Martin is the perfect example of the structures that we're trying to follow. And active schools have been in place, they discovered them. Obviously the partnership between that and Scottish Disability Sport, and then obviously the links with the club was sort of a perfect, it's just been a sort of seamless pathway for Martin.
When you turn around you see Martin, he's beating guys with 2 arms, 2 legs, perfectly able to go down the table. And that's somebody you want to follow, somebody that's got the heart and desire to put his life into the game.
I totally believe that anything is possible. You know, the support from Sport Scotland, Scottish Disability Sport, Drumchapel Table Tennis Club, for me it's been amazing. My future is in para sport and I look forward to that future.
So, a lovely video there, just giving us a nice introduction to Martin. Martin, thanks for joining us today, and thanks also for volunteering to be the first person to undertake a live interview as part of the series. What can you remember from filming the video and, you know, exposing your life to the public there?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. But yeah, from filming that video, the main sort of memories that I have from that was I went back and visited a lot of places from my childhood and adolescence that I had not forgotten about, but not sort of been back to in a very long time. You know, for example, my high school, when we filmed that, I hadn't been there obviously in 6 years. It's not a place that you go back to. But it was very nice to see obviously like the teachers that were still there, and my head teacher, it turns out he was leaving, and you know, we had a very good relationship, so it was actually really nice to see him literally a few months before he moved on to different ventures, you know, so that was nice and things like that. And then going back to where we grew up in Seat Hill in Paisley was something that I've not been there in a very long time, and I don't think I've been back since, just obviously from being an athlete and being all around the world, you know. And it was actually really nice to go back home, as it were, you know, and see where I grew up with my brothers. And so it was actually really nice, regardless of, as you said, sort of exposing yourself a little bit, you know, and doing like the filming like that and the questions. It was actually really nice to go back to places that, as I said, maybe you sort of not forget about, but just don't necessarily go back and visit again.
And I believe you're becoming a bit of an old hand with the media now. You know, you've set up a YouTube channel and a podcast. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it all kind of came about. I was in China with a teammate, and we were chatting about like podcasts and stuff, because we both listen to a lot of them, especially on long haul flights. You know, we get sick of watching the same movies over and over again, so we got really into podcasts, and we were both saying we'd love to start our own, and it was just something that we didn't do. You know, I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to do it, and we never did it. And then when sort of lockdown happened, we both realised we had no excuse, and then we both started our own podcast. So I've got a podcast called Peripod, which is on like YouTube and all podcasting platforms, and it's just something that during lockdown in particular, you know, I realised that I was really missing that human interaction. You know, it's such a part and parcel of everyday life, and especially in a team environment where we sort of train and live together as a squad, and we could no longer do that. You realised how much human interaction you missed. So for me to sort of set the equipment up and then sort of dial in on a Zoom call and have a chat with folk, you know, was really great, and I really enjoyed it. So it sort of kicked on from there, and I've just wrapped up finishing the second season, which is going to be published soon, and it's made me sort of a lot more appreciative of the human interaction that we do get, because obviously at the moment in time that's so limited.
And you know, what sorts of things are you covering in your podcast? You know, is it all to do with athletes, or is it coaches, or is it a range of individuals that you're speaking with?
So the current theme is athletes, and sort of in series 1 I mainly interviewed my teammates, but of course a lot of folk don't find table tennis that interesting, so we tried to actually use our stories together to create sort of another narrative, and sort of tell people's more life stories as opposed to table tennis, So in season 1, we touched on mental health and eating disorders. We touched on like race and religion, and also sharing stories about, injury and overcoming obstacles. For example, one of my teammates was crushed in an agricultural accident at 9 years old. And, we shared that story about how to overcome adversity and how to go on from that, because obviously that's such a traumatic incident.
I mean, it sounds a great listen there, and would encourage people to tune into that. And we may come back and cover some of this later on today, Martin. But to begin with, I'd like to try and delve a little bit deeper into some of the aspects that were introduced in the video. And to start with, I'm really interested in finding out about how your love for sport came about. Can you tell us a little bit about your early experiences of sport and how your interest developed and flourished?
Yeah, I mean, as you've sort of seen in the early stages of the video, I would play a lot of football in particular with my brothers, and it was literally outside the front of that laundrette that we would play. The high flats in the background was where we grew up. We lived there, so there was plenty of sort of open space for us to go and play football, and that naturally sort of instilled a very competitive edge within me. I've got 3 older brothers, I'm the youngest, and to grow up in that environment, it's just no holds barred, absolute carnage at times. You got 4 young boys running around and it's mayhem, so that naturally you have a lot of energy just to try and keep up, and then obviously the competitive side comes out because you never want to lose to your siblings, do you? So that sort of, from a very early age, without realising it at the time, sport was part of my life, whether it was football or TIG, hide and seek, things like that. We were always running about doing some form of activity, and it's only really looking back that you realise actually that was the sort of pathway for me to get involved in sport without even knowing it.
So, this family sibling rivalry was significant in terms of, developing your interests and developing a healthy competitive attitude. A nice term, that, healthy competitive attitude. You also mentioned in the video the role of the school in further shaping your interest in sport. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so sort of in terms of my school life and physical education, it wasn't until my later years in secondary school where I picked PE as a higher subject, and then obviously subsequently going to college and university, that was the field that I was involved in. But yeah, in secondary school in particular, where physical education is much more part of the curriculum, it was very exploratory, for myself in the physical education department, because we had to adapt constantly all the time, because there was set subjects or set sort of sports that the school had to teach, in one way or another, so we're trying to do things like badminton, hockey, football, rugby, gymnastics, as a set curriculum, and then you've got this guy that's got no hands and one leg, and the teachers are a bit baffled about how's this gonna continue, how are you actually gonna do that, so from that age of, I think I was 12 when you go to high school, from that very early age, the teachers were very supportive, and they almost took a back seat. They were very good at just going, just get stuck in, and if an issue crops up, we'll deal with it. And that straight away put me at ease, because they didn't try to exclude me in any way, shape or form, and they also didn't try to wrap me up in cotton wool. They just sort of chucked me in there and said, get on with it, and we'll sort of work it out as we go along. And then especially getting exposure to more structured sport like that, it made me realise that actually there's probably not a sport that I can't play. We just have to find a way how to do it.
And that exploration of problems and challenges, through yourself, discovering ways to adapt and the ways to be able to participate. And it's quite significant, that, isn't it? People weren't solving the challenges for you. You were you were central to that. And there's a nice message there for everyone there that taking responsibility for your own learning is significant here. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I totally agree. It's something that even just like from birth onwards, I've been a problem solver, and it's not been through choice. It's been because I've had to. There's no sort of playbook. There's no rule book that says this is how you do something with no hands. This is how you do something with one leg. Especially at a young age, a lot of people with disabilities, I know from my experiences anyway, I didn't know anyone like me. My family and sort of network around me, they didn't know anyone like me. So there's no real sort of connection to ask for advice and things like that. And obviously, things have changed now. The internet and is much more developed, and there's support groups online and things like that, and you can get advice there. But ultimately, from me being born to who I am now, it's all been about problem solving, because there was no one there to teach me how to write. There was no one there to teach me how to dress myself, feed myself, things like that, So I've always naturally had to solve problems because no one could understand what it was like to have no hands, because everyone's got them, So solving problems like that all the time, you don't think about it, you just have to do it.
Yeah. And I guess, the conditions and the challenges that you faced meant that you had to have a very, open-minded approach from in everything that you did, really.
Yeah, and again, I think that came from my brothers, because they never treated me any differently. They never sort of mollycoddled me or anything. Obviously, I spent a lot of time with my brothers growing up, and so they, as I said, they didn't treat me any differently whatsoever. If anything, they tried to use my disability to their advantage. So if we're playing sport, they're going to chuck me in goals because they're like, oh well, Martin's got no hands, he's not going to save the ball. And things like that. That's the sort of the advantage they would try and take from my disability. But for me, that open-mindedness comes from just sort of the willingness and the want to learn and to adapt and overcome. And I think the physical barriers aren't actually that big. It's more the mental side of things. If you believe that you can find a way to overcome something, chances are you're probably right. But it's the same on the flip side of that. If you don't believe you can do something, then you're also probably right in that aspect as well. So it's all about how you can sort of train your mind to think in a different way.
It was really encouraging to hear you say that your physical education experiences were both inclusive and positive. And for someone who's trained in physical education, that's it's really nice to hear that. What's also interesting is you had a very broad experience of sport, and physical activity. You participated in a wide range of physical activities, prior to you specialising in table tennis. In relative terms, you were quite late to sports specialisation. And do you think that breadth of experience was important in both your personal development, but also your development as an athlete?
Yeah, I think it definitely impacted, because without realising it, playing sport, whether it's a recreational level or an elite level, obviously you're fine tuning motor skills that you might not necessarily develop, especially not consciously. So playing a wide variety of sports, I was constantly, without knowing it, fine tuning things like hand-eye coordination, flexibility, speed, power. And obviously each and every sport comes with its own individual sort of presets of what would make a good athlete in that sport. So the fact that I sort of bounced around from sport to sport and was very competitive with it, whether that was, as I said, recreationally, because I always want to win. I'm always super competitive, So even if it was just a game for a bit of fun, it was never fun for me. I always wanted to be on the winning side. So yeah, I think that sort of breadth of sport involvement in my early childhood and then obviously into adolescence made a massive difference when it came to table tennis, because even though I wasn't technically very sound, because that was something that I had to be taught in terms of, you know, the right technique and the right position and where to stand and things like that. I had a natural sort of hand-eye coordination ability that was at a decent standard, you know, especially for a beginner, regardless of age. You know, I've seen people with two hands and two legs that are older than me or whatever pick up a bat for the first time and they can't hit a ball because the coordination's not there. Whereas I could hit a ball straight away. It just wasn't very technically sound because I hadn't been taught that yet.
So, you know, how did table tennis become a prominent feature in your life? How were you introduced to it, and you know, how did your love for the sport develop?
It was through playing rugby, actually. So yeah, as I said, the PE department in high school was very open and very inclusive. And the head of the department said to me, you know, I've always been a big guy. I've been over 6 foot tall from a very young age, and you know, so I've always been quite a lump of a boy. And they had this local sevens tournament where all the schools would come together and play in a sevens rugby environment, and we ended up going on to win that tournament. And there was a picture of me in the local paper with like a rugby ball and the rest of my teammates, and someone's holding a trophy, and we're all covered in mud and, you know, obviously having a great time. And someone from Scottish Disability Sport was fortunate enough to live in the same area. They seen that local paper and got in contact with the school and were like, you've got a para athlete competing able-bodied sport, like, what's the script here? Like, you know, how do we get in contact with him? And that's how it all sort of started. I then got invited to a Scottish Disability Sports summer camp, where you went and tried lots of different sports to, you know, see what interested you and to see if there was a pathway in that area. And on the final day of this summer camp, Terry from Drumchapel Table Tennis Club came down with a lot of great players, and they sort of got involved with us all, and all these people with, you know, disabilities and things like that, and we played. And I was, as I said earlier, I was dreadful, but I could hit the ball, and I had really good fun. And that was it, really. I just sort of started playing for fun. You know, I didn't pick up a bat for the first time and be like, oh, I'm wanting to go to the Paralympics. You know, I picked up a bat and played for the first time because it was fun and it looked fun, and everyone around me was sort of having a laugh with it. And it just sort of slowly gathered a bit of momentum, and then snowballed from that incident of just playing for fun, and then it became my life and my livelihood.
It's very interesting how you've, you know, mapped out in a summary form the evolution of your early development here, from, you know, playing sport for fun, supported through your family, to being encouraged in physical education, to then having this breadth of experience, and then starting to focus on something that really excites you. And I'm sure many of the audience today will have read Matthew Syed's book Bounce, where he reflects on his own development as a table tennis player. And you know, he makes some interesting personal conclusions about the nature versus nurture debate in relation to talent. I'm sure you've read the book. You know,
yep.
Every table tennis player must have read the book. I mean, what's your reflections on Saeed's account of nature versus nurture, and where do you stand in the debate in relation to your own development experience?
For me, I think it's a bit of a balance. You can't really have one without the other, you know. But I definitely lean more towards it's the nurture, you know. As I said, obviously early on in my life, I played lots of different sports, and I didn't realise at the time that would give me an advantage in terms of honing in my skills on one sport, you know. So I'd playing lots of different sports, as I said, helped my hand-eye coordination and things like that. So when I first picked up a bat to play table tennis, I found it quite easy to track the ball and to make connection. But if I had just played in that sort of same environment and that same level of motivation, I wouldn't really have improved much, you know. I could spend all day, every day playing recreationally and wouldn't be very good, you know. So as much as the sort of nature side of it, where I had those sort of advantages from a child, where I was exposed to sport without realising it, actually it's all about how you can, nurture it if we're going to go down that route, and how you can actually shape it. So for me, it's all about the processes that you put in terms of the training environment, the mentality, and things like that. There's so much more to it than just being good at something.
Well, that probably leads us nicely on to my next point, which is we got some exposure of, Drumchapel Sports Club there. And, with all respect, it's not glossy, it's not sexy, it's not, fantastically new, but, I have been there, and you can almost taste the culture when you walk into the place. Can you tell us a little bit about what goes on there?
Oh, I mean, we could do a whole chat on what goes on at Drumchapel Table Tennis Club. That can be a whole nother conversation. But yeah, there's something about the club that just draws people in, and we've got people there that have been playing for like their entire lives, from very young kids, and they're now in their 70s and 80s, and they just love the game. But it's the environment of that club where there's it's almost like a no holds barred experience. The chats and the want for a better term, like the slaggings that go on in that club, and it's just such a friendly, warm environment that sort of reminds you of family. The insults and stuff that get thrown around that club are the types of things that you chuck into your brothers and sisters, that only you can say. And that makes the club special, because as soon as you walk in the door, you're made to feel welcome. And that welcoming approach is that you're going to be made to feel like everyone else. And that's the fact that we're going to, have a laugh with each other and poke fun at each other. And then equally we'll support you just as much, because that's what a family does, and for me, Drumchapel Table Tennis Club is just so special, because, you have that family environment as well as a whole breadth of people wanting to play at different levels. If you want to be a recreational player, then that's fine, do it, come along for fun, play table tennis. We want people playing. If you want to, try and play in the British League and go for the Premier title, then that opportunity is there. If you're like myself that wants to go to the Paralympic Games, then that opportunity is there. But everybody gets treated the same. There's no special treatment. There's no sort of separation of any member of the club. And it's that family environment where, as I said, we're just going to have a laugh with each other. But equally, if you want to, you can work very hard.
I think you summarised that lovely there, and there's this safe, supportive environment that gives you a sense of belonging. And, even though that you're training mostly away from there, you still have this sense of belonging to go back there. And that's pretty strong, pretty significant. Just shifting on a little bit, tell us how you transited, how you shifted from playing the sport in a recreational guise to then becoming serious about it and being classed as a performance para-athlete in the sport.
Yeah, well, as I said, I've always been very competitive, so even in the sort of early days of playing, I wanted to win, but I didn't really have that sort of, as I said, I didn't pick up a bat and go, I want to go to the Paralympic Games, so it wasn't until I actually went to the Paralympic Games as a spectator in London 2012 when I went down to London and I saw Paralympics GB win 2 bronze medals on the day that I was there. And to see these giants, these absolute superhuman athletes performing at the highest level and captivating a live audience, of thousands of people. And then when the final points were played and the medals were won and the whole place erupted, I was like, right, okay, no, I'm going to take this pretty serious now, because they're like me. And if they can do it, then surely if I put in the work, then I can do it. So that was the spark, that was the catalyst that after seeing London, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do everything I can to try and be like those guys.
And did you have to transmit that message to the coaches, or did they see it in you?
No, so at that time it was just I was training 2 days a week at Drumchapel, and that was because that was the sessions that are on offer there. The Drumchapel club is open on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night, so that's all that I was able to do. So after seeing London, I was like, right. I spoke to Terry, the guy that runs the club. I was like, is there any way that we can, do something where I can train more, because that's what I want to do. So he then sort of he found me like another coach that could put in more time on different days so that I could train sort of out with the normal hours of the club. And it just kind of started from there. So I went from like 2 nights a week to 3, then 4, then 5, and just sort of built it up like that. And I was taking training sessions as and when they became available, because I just wanted to improve all the time. And then, I start playing more tournaments, and at these para tournaments, I got invited onto the GB Pathway squad, which is kind of like the sort of step down from the performance area, where they kind of look to try and nurture a little bit of talent. And even the coaches there that are still involved in the setup now will tell you that I didn't have much talent to nurture, but it was the way that I approached training. It was the attitude and the way that I looked to try and perform on the table, that they sort of seen something in me, and they were like, yeah, it's that we want to try and sort of harness. And even my teammates, they don't let me forget it. They're like, you first came to Sheffield, you were dreadful. But it's the way you apply yourself to try and improve. So yeah, it came about like that, where I got invited onto a program just because of my work ethic, not even because of the quality of the way I could play.
And I mean, did you sense that difference when you first went there? You were parachuted into a new environment, a relatively quick, accelerated development into a performance athlete. And by your own admission, having very limited high performance coaching at that point, I mean, did you feel exposed? Did you feel unsure about your ability in comparison to the people round about you at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I would walk into the hall every day knowing that I was the worst player in there, and it wasn't through the want of trying. I was obviously trying to improve all the time, but I knew ultimately that I was the worst player in that hall. And the only way that could change was by doing all the hard work, doing the extra sessions, doing the gym work, doing the conditioning work, making sure that I was eating well in order to fuel my body, getting enough sleep, and that obviously came from being in that environment, and seeing what other people were doing. But ultimately, I didn't want to be the worst player in that hall. And that was a massive sort of massive turning point, because nobody wants to be the worst in their field, but when you're in a high performance environment that only has maybe sort of 12 or 14 athletes, it's very easy to see. And so obviously I became a bit conscious of, I'm the runt of the litter here almost, you know what I mean? So it was easy for me to really get my head down and work hard, because I didn't want to feel like that anymore. I didn't want to be, I on the bottom. I wanted to sort of try and kick on, and that made a massive difference.
And being around a critical mass of athletes that are, committing their lives to high performance and to excellence, that being around these people and that high performance culture that emerges there must have helped as well, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, everyone in our squad in Sheffield is training for the exact same goal, and that's to be Paralympic champion. So the joy of Paralympic sport is that pretty much all of us could be, because of the different classifications. So it's a great environment to be in, because everyone has the same goal and the same purpose. And even though we're an individual sport, we come together as a team, as one unit to help each other progress. So as I said, I was very aware of my level first stepping into the hall in Sheffield where the national team train. But the guys around me, even from world and Paralympic champions to people that were at the time, sort of top 20 in the world and looking to kick on, they all helped that development, because they knew that if I'd got the nod from the coaching staff to be in that hall, then I deserved to be in that hall, regardless of ability. So they were very helpful in terms of giving me advice and taking the sort of time to train a little bit extra with me on the side and things like that, because someone did that for them, or sometimes actually someone didn't do it for them and they wish someone had, so they then passed that on to me. So it was being in that environment is so much more helpful, because everyone's training for the same thing. And even though you can get caught up in the selfishness of it, of I want to be Paralympic champion, we're never really allowed to do that because of that sort of family environment that we have our values up on the wall. We've got a very customised training centre down in Sheffield that's sort of kitted out for us and for our values on the wall, and sort of team achievements and things like that. And to have that family environment, we're never allowed to get overly selfish and to get overly sort of involved too much with what we're doing as individuals, because ultimately we're there as a team to perform together.
And just reflecting on that critical stage where you've made the decision that you want to commit to becoming an elite para-athlete, and you're adapting your lifestyle and you're increasing your training, and you're searching for support from others. You also chose to sign up for a university degree, and you end up following this dual career approach to study and to sport. How did you find that, studying and high performance sport?
It was difficult, obviously, when I had made the decision to study at UWS. I wasn't a fully funded athlete. I wasn't any sort of funded athlete. So it was a no-brainer for me, because I knew that obviously I was trying my hardest on the table to achieve, but at the same time I have a career after sport. I'm going to have a life after sport, and like any professional athlete, it's not a career unless you're a footballer. It's not a career that you retire on. You go out and you develop in that way. So for me to study at UWS, I knew that I wanted to go to university, and so to do that was great. But then it just so happened that after about 8 months to a year studying at UWS, I was getting more and more opportunities to train with the national squad, to go to more competitions and things like that. And that's where obviously I noticed this sort of shift of I'm going to have to prioritise one over the other. And my lecturers were very supportive, in terms of, maybe shouldn't be saying this if someone's listening, but in terms of like shifting deadlines and things like that. And I got not special treatment, but I got accommodated for my sporting needs, and I was made to feel supported at UWS when I was obviously trying to study full time, but train full time. Something's eventually going to give, so my lecturers, all of them, within every module, was very supportive in the fact that they understood that I was chasing something a little bit bigger than myself, trying to get to the Paralympic Games. And then obviously, as things progressed, the call came, do you want to come and live and train full time at the National Centre and, hopefully get to the Paralympic Games one day? And for me, it was a no-brainer. I had to take that leap to go down south to Sheffield and to train and live full time as an athlete. So it was a very quick transition. But thankfully, when they wanted me down, I was able to finish studying, so it was not too bad.
And that's really nice to hear that the university was able to support you with your development. I know that that's one of the central pillars of the University Sport Scholarship Programme, and I know that you benefited from gaining a Sports Scholarship Award. And was that quite a prestigious accolade for you at the time to get recognition in that respect?
Absolutely. It made me feel, as you said, supported. It made me feel like the university actually took what I was doing seriously. It wasn't just about you come to the university, you study, you get a degree, and then it looks good on our transcripts that we have X amount of individuals achieving academically. It was really good to feel that support from a performance level. I was allowed to go and train and compete all over the world while still having to put in essays and stuff and things like that. So it was things like you'd be on a long haul flight to somewhere across the world, and before I'm on the flight, I'm like, I'm going to miss this deadline. It's like, why? Because I'm 30 odd thousand feet in the air and I can't obviously submit it, so things like that, I would have prepared chats with lecturers to obviously accommodate those scenarios and situations. But yeah, to get the sports scholarship, it made me feel like the university was taking my sporting career as well as my academic career equally as importantly.
And some of those circumstances that you face, like having to communicate with staff and request for support in terms of reconfiguring deadlines, etc. I mean, these are quite important skills that you learn from being in the university environment. Are there any other skills or values that you developed from your time at university that have stood you in good stead in relation to both your sport, but also really just how you conduct yourself in life in general, I guess?
Well, as you obviously touched upon, the communication skills, and obviously to sort of, if we put it into sort of a business and academic sense, is speaking up towards that higher chain of command. So if I had been quite sheepish and quite sort of standoffish in terms of what I wanted from the lecturers, then I wouldn't have got the support that I had. So how are they going to know that I'm trying to compete for Team GB if I don't tell them? So how are they going to accommodate my wants and needs if I don't make them aware of that? So being able to sort of, for want of a better phrase, stand up for myself and be like, this is the support that I would really appreciate and need. Can we accommodate it? More often than not, the answer was yes. But also just basic teamwork skills from obviously, everyone does group work as part of the courses, and to have the cooperation and understanding from my peers to be like I'll do what I can, but you have to understand, as I said, like if I'm at a competition or something like that, or if I'm in training camp, I'm probably not getting much work done, and obviously my peers eventually understood. It was a bit of like, well, you're looking for an excuse not to work, and it's like, oh, it's not that. I'm trying to do what I'm doing, so that sort of teamwork ethos helped massively, and still does. The fact that it's just cooperation and understanding that everyone's different, and whether you're on a team or working as an individual, you need these communication skills, because they help you so much.
And have you got any memorable moments of your time at university? Fiona Averill, one of your lecturers, ably described you as a very cheeky young chappie, Martin. So that
sounds about right, yeah. That sounds about right, yeah. We'll leave it at that.
It could have been a lot worse. I'm sure Fiona could have been a lot worse. So we'll take that.
I like to think of it as charming.
Okay. So let's just shift the conversation on now. I mean, you are an elite athlete, and that's something to be proud of, absolutely. But lots of people play sport. The vast majority of us get to a recreational level, or we have an interest at performance level. But only a tiny percentage of people get to be classed as world class. And by world class, I'm talking about being in the top 20 or 25 in the world in the sport. And I mean, do you regard yourself as a world-class athlete? I mean, that's quite significant, that, recognising that you're at that stage.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. But I guess in terms of what I've achieved and what I want to go on to achieve, I wouldn't class myself as world-class. I wouldn't put myself in that bracket, simply because for me, top 20, like, that's not good enough. That's not going to get me to the Paralympic Games. It's not going to get me to the World Championships. It's not going to get me to ultimately world number one. And if I look at the current world number one, he's almost exactly like me in terms of the disability. We have a very similar disability in terms of the arms and the leg and things like that. And it's something that I look to that and think, right, well, what are the differences here? And it's just, okay, at the moment, he's been playing about 10 years longer, but ultimately his skill level is higher. So, for me, sort of top 10 is world class, and I'm still trying to break into that barrier, and I think it's something that obviously I'm striving for, but at the moment, sitting inside the top 20, I wouldn't class as world class. My career high to date is 14 in the world, and I remember getting to 14, I was like, wow, I've just become top 15 in the world. And then, like, one of my teammates gave me a nudge and went, but you're not top 12 like me. I was like, so I was like, there's always something better. There's always something to push on. So yeah, for me, I wouldn't consider myself as world class, but I'm certainly striving to be.
And it's nice to hear that you're aspirational and you're continually resetting your goals. And, research would suggest that's an important aspect of your development and getting you there. And we wish you well. I'm sure you will. I mean, that becomes the longest leap, isn't it? Moving from being a high performance athlete to someone ranked, somewhere in the top 25, to then becoming a top 10 in the world. That jump becomes almost the longest leap. And what is it that'll take you there? Is it mindset? Is it working harder? Is it changing the way in which you go about your daily life? What is it?
For me, I think it encompasses a lot of things. And to narrow it down, I would say it's consistency. It's consistency in training. It's consistency in the way you approach certain things, whether it be nutrition, sleep. Sleep as an athlete is, I think, often overlooked, and things like that. But also, it's of course it's consistency in level of performance. It's at a high level. I've beaten guys inside the top 5 in the world, but what separates me from them is they'll beat the guys inside the top 10 day in, day out, and they don't really lose to anyone below them, hopefully, unless it's me. So it's that consistency of performing at a high level and making sure that you, even on an off day, can put away the players below and around you and actually take a few players from above you off the ranking list, by having that consistent performance. And that's what really, when you start breaking into the top 10, they only really lose to each other. Obviously, you'll get the odd upset here and there, but it's that level of consistency where they're not really going to lose to anyone outside of the top 10. And it's not necessarily a skill thing. It's they just know how to sort of grind out matches and win in a way that wouldn't necessarily be orthodox, but they can do it time and time again, and that's something that obviously I'm still trying to learn. I've had great wins over my career. As I said, I've beaten a fair number of players inside the top 10, but out of maybe 5 times that we play, I'll win maybe 1, and things like that. So it's having that. You want that momentum obviously in your favour. You want to be winning 3, 4, 5 out of 5, and that's things that these guys can do day in, day out. And I think the main thing is consistency.
I guess marginal gains make a big difference, at elite level. I mean, to this point, it would appear that your development has followed a pretty seamless path here, and you've had this upwardly accelerating profile in your sport, Martin. But the world doesn't work like this. There are setbacks and there are dark moments. Can you tell us about any setbacks that you've suffered and how you dealt with them and what you learned from them?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you touched upon obviously is the momentum going like this. Everything looks like it's going up, but if I was to show you the world ranking list detailed from the last 18 months, I'm like, you go up, you go down, you go up, you go down. It's constantly moving and changing, So you might even only fall 1 place, but that's still a step back, because obviously you're trying to reach the top. But for me, one of the biggest setbacks was that I, for the World Championships in 2018, I was in a position to qualify. The qualification criteria at that time was top I think it was top 18 in the world, and I was sitting on 18, and there was one tournament left. It was the US Open, and there was people around about me going there that could have, depending on performance, sort of bumped me out of that World Championship position. And I was like, right, well, I want to go there and make sure that I solidify my spot. You know, if I can jump even one place in the ranking list, I'm more secure than what I would be where I was. And previous year, I had won the US Open. So I was thinking, you know, I can go there, I can defend my title, I can solidify my place at the World Championships. And lo and behold, I didn't even make it out of my group, you know. And so obviously that was really tough to take, because I've not just turned up at a tournament, I've turned up at a tournament that I won the previous year and didn't get out of my group. I've then chucked away my chance to compete at my first singles World Championships. And I only dropped one place on the ranking list by not making it out of my group. But that one place was enough to take me out of the World Championships. And everyone else in the GB squad qualified besides me and one other. So even though there was only one other person, that was still a very lonely place. You know, yeah, I was very quite emotionally hurt after that, because even by the coaching staff, they kind of advised me, don't go. You know, as it stands, you're in a spot, someone has to jump above you. They have to obviously play really good to do that. But I felt unsafe in that position, because I was the final person on the list, and I felt that it would have been out of my control had someone obviously gone to the tournament and jumped above me. So I sort of took it on my own responsibility to go there and to try and defend not only my previous title, but to defend my spot. But I don't regret that decision. You know, obviously it was a tough pill to swallow, the fact that I'd pulled myself out of a World Championship place, but I don't regret the decision, because I did it on my terms. You know, I made the decision to go and to try and defend what I wanted to defend, and that didn't happen. But it helped me sort of understand a bit more about myself, and actually sometimes it can be better not to compete, you know, and not to go chasing things, because when you start getting desperate and start chasing things, you tend to slip. It can be very common that athletes slip and make mistakes, you know. And so as I said, I don't regret that decision, but that was a very tough pill to swallow, the fact that I not only mucked up defending my US Open title, but I didn't qualify for the World Championships as a result.
I mean, sometimes we learn a lot from difficult moments, and experiential learning is very vital to people's development. Martin, we've only got through about half the stuff that I'd hoped for, and that's not your fault. That's you know, I think it's been very encouraging the way in which you've spoken here. What I'm really keen to do is to try and give the audience an opportunity for their questions to be considered. So I'm going to pass over to Rebecca and Ewan, who are looking at the chat, and they may be able to direct some questions from the audience to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Martin. Yeah. Sorry, Rebecca. Do you want me to go first?
No, on you go, Ewan.
Okay, thanks. So from Kyle, Martin, do you feel that the attitude your high school teachers took was the best approach, focusing on developing your responsibility for physical activity, sports? Or is there another approach that you think would have proved better? Or is self-responsibility the best way to develop competency in sports?
Well, I mean, it wasn't all on me. You know, they always had a watchful eye on what I was doing to make sure that I didn't hurt or injure myself. But it was just the fact that the way in which the high school supported me was that there was no exclusion. You know, they didn't exclude me from anything, and they didn't say there was something that I couldn't do. They were very open for me to try and to see what would happen. And then, you know, when it came to exam results and things like that, you get graded on a physical grade as well as a academic grade. And to do that, I remember the head of the PE department had to actually have a conversation with someone at the SQA, because they were like, how do we physically grade on technique with a guy that's got no hands and one leg? And they were like, good question. And so when it came to things like, individual sports like badminton, the head of the PE department was like, well, he beats half the class anyway, and he's got half the limbs. So surely if he had the full limbs, he'd beat the majority of the class and things like that, So there was things like that where they in terms of grading, were quite lenient, because they've seen, as I said, like the way I would apply myself and things like that. So they were very standoffish, but with a watchful eye.
That's great, thanks. And Andrew's asking, when you transferred from playing the sport for fun to the elite level, what were the key differences in your training routine in terms of frequency, intensity, time, type? And I think you've touched on this a little bit, but was there any differences you made to your dietary intake in order to achieve the success that you have?
So the main differences were obviously frequency and time on the table. I had to obviously spend a lot more time on the table to get to the level that I wanted to. But yeah, diet was obviously a thing. I was playing for fun. I was 17, 18. You want to go for a drink with your mates and things like that. I can see you laughing and you're trying to hold that in there. But that's the things you do. You know what it's like. That's the things you do as a young guy. You want to obviously have fun with your friends and things like that. And you maybe eat one too many Dominoes or things like that we're all guilty of doing. So when I decided to obviously focus more on a performance level, I knew that I couldn't do that, and I knew that those things weren't going to get me to the level that I wanted to, because nutrition is key. It really does make a big impact on performance. So that was obviously a big shift for me. It was something that, due to my upbringing, I wasn't very knowledgeable about what good food actually was. So that was, I sought out a lot of advice, and a lot of sort of, not mentorship in terms of what I eat, but I had to sort of discover a little bit more about what nutrition actually meant to be an elite athlete, and that was a big change for me. But the bonus is, I was quite a chubby kid growing up, and I still get to eat just as much food, which I love. But thankfully now it's all a bit more nutritious, and it actually helps me.
That's great, thanks. And Haley was asking, can you tell us about your current training regime and what the priorities are just now for you to work on to meet your next goal?
Yeah, so current training regime is 5 days a week, and it's usually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday for me, and that's at least 4 hours a day on the table, and then out with that, I'm running 3 times a week. I'm doing home workouts. I'm still not comfortable going into public gyms and stuff just yet. It's just a decision that I've made, so I'm very content doing home workouts. I've got good sponsors in the fact that they were able to ship me up an exercise bike and some free weights and stuff like that, so I can crack on with stuff in the house. So I'm very comfortable and confident doing that. But yeah, it's still, even during all this sort of uncertain times, I'm still training just as hard and just as much. And if anything, I'm probably squeezing in a few extra hours because of the relationship I've got with the guys at Drumchapel Table Tennis Club. I can actually get in a little bit more, which is good. But yeah, it's still just as intense, and it's something that I'm really enjoying doing, because obviously for a very long time we didn't know what was going to happen. Table tennis was one of the last sports to get back into actual physical training due to restrictions on numbers of people, and we're an indoor sport, ventilation, things like that. So it took us a while to get on the table, and now that I'm back on the table, I'm absolutely loving it. It made me realise that I missed it so much.
Great. I know we're running out of time a little bit, but maybe squeeze just one more in, and it's continuing the training from Dominico. When you train, do you prioritise training form, skills practice, physical training, or playing form, playing condition games, training cognitive and perceptual skills?
We go through phases. So what we do, obviously conscious of time, I'll try and talk a wee bit quicker. We go through phases. So we come up with training blocks and sort of regimes within that. So you'll go through maybe say a 6 or 8 week block where you work on footwork, and then you'll go through another block where you work on like something that in your game that you maybe struggle with, and then you'll do competition phases where you do a lot of match practice, you do a lot of match play, a lot of exercises that maybe break down a lot because it's service and receive, and you're not just putting loads and loads of time on the table. It's all that sort of things that lead into point play and into competition. So we go through, we structure our sessions like that. You know, it's that sort of format where we do blocks of working on this and then another block of this and then so on and so forth. And we find as a team that's the way to develop, rather than just doing a bit of this and a bit of that as and when you feel like it.
That's great, thanks. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, but I'll pass over to Raleigh to kind of wrap up, if that's okay. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. So, look, man, I think we've probably had too much of your time here. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege listening to you today. And, you know, we could spend the rest of the day, I'm sure, learning more about your habits and your behaviours as an elite athlete. And it's been really worthwhile. I mean, what's absolutely clear is, you know, you've got a growth mindset, you've got a determination to succeed, you've got a desire to set new goals, and you know, you've got considered resilience and flexibility to the way in which you know, things happen and things that are out with your control, you're able to deal with that. So, you know, all the ingredients are there for success. We wish you the very, very best of luck. And, you know, we'll follow with interest your career going forward, and hopefully these goals are set for you. So thank you so much for that. Can I thank the audience for also joining in today? I hope you've learned a little bit and hope you've enjoyed the session. And our next session is in a week's time, where we have the badminton player, Kirsty Gilmore, also a graduate from UWS, who will spend a little bit of time telling us about her career, and will reflect on her successes in Commonwealth and European events. So we look forward to you tuning in then, and thanks to everyone, and thanks to you, Martin, for your time today.